Do you remember the first time you saw Alien, sitting in the theater with the lights off, and the chill of the auditorium air conditioning flowing through you, making the atmosphere more chilling and horrific? The speakers surrounding you. You hear every sound, every gargling breath of the creature that is only seen from the shadows. I don't. I wasn't old enough to know that feeling. I do hope someday they re-release it into theaters and I can check it out that way, because I love that film and I wish I could have experienced it that way for the first time. I have a deep appreciation for this franchise and the world that Ridley Scott created. So I went back to watch his 2 Alien prequel films and I adore them a lot. And I think they are well added additions to the franchise and add rich lore. I know these films are mostly not liked or appreciated by most Alien fans, but I truly believe there is an abundance to love about these films. Ridley Scott is a man of his craft. He knows how to direct a movie. Those talents are put into major use with these 2 individual films. He put so much effort into expanding his original vision, going back to the concepts that he had in his brain during the inception of his original masterpiece. This man spent a little over 30 years with all these other ideas in his head, and to him, they were prolific and important enough to make into fruition all these decades later. You can tell with Prometheus specifically, there was a ton of thought put into it before he hired writers to pen a script. Covenant is the one I prefer more, even though I think Prometheus is better on a story and writing level. But I think the same things apply for the most part with Covenant too. I think there was a lot more changes to how the story plays out for the sake of the fans. I see this one as a course correction for Scott. He got his use out of the engineers and knew the audience was not that big of a fan of them, so he progressed the story forward without them. Which seems like the natural progression when you see where the film ends. This planned trilogy really is about David and his realization of consciousness. It's about the creation of the xenomorphs and his plan to extinguish humanity, since he believes them to be the lesser entities of this universe. Ideas aside, both films are stunning to look at. The cinematography is godly. The lighting and color correction fits the tones beautifully. The calming camera movements trick us, so when shit gets real and the camera starts violently picking up speed, the stakes become real in a matter of seconds. His creation of suspension is utterly baffling, the way he builds up tension in situations that shouldn't come across that way on paper. But with his direction, simple conversations start going down a winding path of doom and dread. Using the camera as a tool to lurk around in the darkness, to hide behind every corner, using his elaborately built sets to convey a coldness, a sickness, a level of sinister behavior that is hiding in plain sight, and all the same hiding behind it in a shade of mystery. When a scene goes full throttle into horror territory, it becomes a complete disarray of the senses, evoking fear by using bodily harm to a character. The thought alone of a being living inside of us, waiting to burst out, is a disgustingly frightening concept that is a staple in the Alien franchise. One of my favorite scenes in the prequels is from Covenant, when the first xenomorph starts coming out of the man, but it does something we haven't seen before. It's a small change, but it's an effective one at that. The xenomorph decides to birth itself through the man's back instead of his stomach, allowing Ridley to create a new element to a sequence that we have seen a dozen times, thus creating something different and enthralling, horrific, and a bloody damn good anxiety booster. The way Ridley produces horror is very different to how most horror-based filmmakers approach it, because Ridley is not a horror director and is not making a horror film. He is simply a man who knows what a story needs, and these stories in the Alien universe need a good grasp of horror to truly sell its story. One of the 2 reasons I prefer his 3 Alien films over the other ones that have come after the original 1979 feature is the basic idea of allowing horror to take a forefront and action to subside and pop up when needed. But the thing that makes the horror so scary is it comes from a source of science fiction, and all of the best science fiction comes from a place of plausibility, and with them setting the franchise so far into the future, there is a great deal of plausibility. The real thought of these beings being alive somewhere out there in the vast darkness traveling around is a very real threat. Bacterial microbiological parasites are a scary thought beyond belief. The biggest aspect of the prequel films that everyone despises is the fact that they feel quote-unquote pointless and take away from the original stories. They find the engineers as a bad addition, and making the fact that we know where the xenomorph comes from somehow lessens how scary it is. I think that's a load of bullshit. If I'm being completely honest, I think it's coming from a place of not wanting change to films or franchises that we love and adore. You see it a lot with Star Wars and Star Trek. I don't think it's unnecessary when you actually take a closer look at the original movie and see how they don't ever answer where that ship came from. And once again, I understand the mystery can and usually makes things scarier, but I have to express once again that these films are science fiction first, and you can tell Ridley had a bigger idea and already had a sense of where these beings came from. The warship the Nostromo visits clearly is alluding to a higher being, possibly of consciousness and intellect. You see a pilot suit, and Ridley always wanted to tell the story of how that got there. I personally love the idea of the engineers and the concept of finding our creators and wondering about how they perceive how we turned out. The question of can our creations become more powerful than us and ultimately cause our end, something I'll get more into with the next chapter but should still be at least stated here. I especially love how it's the creator's creation that made another creation that ultimately destroyed them. I find that shocking and different to how a predictable story would have played out. Instead of us killing them, it's David, a machine that wants to not just kill his creator's creator, but kill his creator as well. I know, a lot of the same words, sorry, I'll pull back. Lastly, I don't think that just because we know where the xenomorphs come from lessens the impact of their presence in other installments. It's not like the new added lore goes balls to the wall crazy and takes liberties upon itself to completely outright disrespect the original source material, whether it be in continuity or tone, unlike Resurrections, which is, something we don't talk about. I think this added lore actually makes these films more rewatchable because there is a ton of themes with subtle and non-subtle philosophical elements that make the series true science fiction and not some dumbed down action movie with cheesy one-liners and an alien or aliens that need to be killed off because it'd be fucking kick-ass to see, right? These two movies, like most of Ridley's work in his first Alien film, ask you to think and flex that sexy right brain of yours and get it all wrinkly and shit. Anyways, I love the deeper messages that are brought up through the exploration of the new lore. These movies truly ask you to think about what it means to be mortal and ask us what's more important, leaving a legacy or living longer. There seems like there can only be one choice. And if you leave a legacy, what are the consequences to yourself in doing so? If you live longer, do nothing with your life, will you be remembered? Along with that, as stated earlier, you were asked to see what you would do if you knew God existed and wanted to end you. How does all of humanity deal with such a harsh threat? My creator thinks I'm worthless, so what do I do about it? Other great debates are about what does a conscious mind mean? Does consciousness mean that you have a soul? How close are we to machines? I mean, if we built them to have responses and emotions similar to us, then why wouldn't our creators have done the same? Does that make us machines in a way? Just because life is not up to a specific standard, does that give anyone the right to eradicate it? Can the creators get jealous of their creation? These are all fascinating questions and debates that get brought up with these two films and touches more on these aspects that were present in the first film itself. Look, I like Aliens, but I'm not as fond of it as most other people are. I think taking the series into an action-heavy spectacle is something you can do and do it well, but I think if you make it solely action, it starts to lose the magic that the original had. It strips away these thought-provoking ideas and concepts that make it more than a film about a scary alien. I think the prequels brought back that original feeling, which I hear you, Prometheus doesn't feel like an alien movie. Yes, it does. The thing that everyone is caught up on is that there is no xenomorph, but it is very much an alien film. There is a crew of people going into deep space for the purposes of a big company. The same corporate company, mind you. They land on a planet with a ship harboring some type of parasite. Someone gets affected and horrors ensue as each person is getting picked off one by one until there's only one survivor standing, all while asking meaningful questions about life and existence. Sounds like an alien film to me. More so than Aliens, Alien 3, or that abomination Resurrections. So there are two major problems people have with the xenomorph. One, the lack of presence in Prometheus, and two, the use of full-blown CG in Covenant. I get the complaints, I really do. For me, when it comes to the choice of full-blown CGI for the xenomorph, I'm not all for it. I will always prefer practical over CG, but the thing is, these films had $150 million budgets, so the xenomorph, it doesn't look like shit. It's just, once again, personal memories of the original that are interfering with how people perceive these new films, and they don't want to accept that things can change and expand as time goes on. In fact, it's important that things change and don't stay exactly the same, because then it's boring and people begin to lose interest. And for the case of Prometheus, the xenomorph itself, the physical being, was not important to that particular story. It's just that simple. Plus, the xenomorph is something that should not be exploited. Look at Resurrections. It exploited the shit out of the xenomorph, and that's when you truly lose the scariness and the mystery. Not the background of the character, but more importantly where the character is in the moment and how other characters, who are our eyes as an audience member, see and understand the creature. The xenomorph should be kept at bay. Something I quickly want to talk about is Michael Fassbender as David and, of course, Walter. David is the most compelling aspect about this prequel duology, and Fassbender gives an incredibly engaging, complex, and layered performance that has you sympathizing with him while fearing and rejecting what he does as a character. His motives make sense, and it's a scary thought that a machine that was created to help humanity turns against it and seeks to destroy it. A plot that has been around since the early 1950s and is redundant. But the difference here is that the machine is treated as an actual person and character. He shows emotions, he shows growth, and he shows change. You are shown his point of view, and I think that's why I find these prequels so compelling, that they're able to take concepts that have been run to the ground and make them new and refreshing in totally intriguing new ways. In conclusion, the prequels Ridley Scott planned to make were the true story that has been in his head for decades, and I believe there is a tough stigma with prequels that we put upon filmmakers. We don't want to see what came before. We want to see where the story goes, not where it was. And I think that's a true shame. I mean, just look at George Lucas and how his entire fan base bullied him so much he fucking sold his company to Disney. Alien fans are sort of doing the same thing to Scott, and I think it's unfair. I think at the end of the day, this is his story, and we should respect that. It's one thing if they were truly bad films, but they're not. It's just not what we want, and that's two different things. We as a movie-going audience need to learn how to respect a filmmaker's story and not be so quick to judge where it's going. We should allow them to tell their story the way they want to, because it's not ours, and we don't know where it's going. So just think about opening up your horizons and not allowing nostalgia for something to hold you back from new experiences and stories. Because if we never support new things, all we're left with is the same stagnant film-going experience for years to come. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Whaltuh. Put your dick away, Whaltuh. I'm not having sex with you right now, Whaltuh.
A few moments later.